Welcome, and thank you for joining Energy Dialogues for the next installment of the Energy Dialogues University Connect podcast. This podcast highlights intergenerational conversations about potential concerns the younger generation has when it comes to energy, opportunities to join the workforce in the sector, and why this is such a great time to do so. We also give insight into a day in the life of executives in the energy industry, offering a unique snapshot at the peak of their career. Prepare for frank conversations between the generations, discussing the opportunities and challenges of energy and its critical need to recruit the leaders of tomorrow. You will gain valuable career advice, as well as learn lessons from some of the leading minds in the business. We are at a pivotal moment now, with the energy industry experiencing ongoing change, and there has never been a better time to join a sector that focuses on solutions for human development and energy access globally. This podcast will address concerns, encourage and enlighten the rising stars of the new generation, and share how our network of prestigious leaders got to where they are today. And now, I'd like to hand it over to Michael Wood, co-founder of the Energy Dialogue-sponsored student-run organization Energy Terminal, who will be speaking with the newly appointed president and CEO of Williams, Chad Zamarin. Michael?
Thanks, Benna. Chad, welcome to EDU Connect by Energy Dialogues. Pleasure to have you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. And first off, congratulations on assuming the new role as CEO of Williams, and especially thank you for taking time in what is probably a very, very busy first week.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's good to spend the time with you, though.
Glad to hear it. So obviously, it might be a new role, but certainly not a new industry for you. You've had executive roles at Williams for the past almost decade, companies like Cheniere, and have a really strong background in the industry. Would love to kind of go back to the beginning of your career and talk us through how did you get interested in energy in the first place, and what led you to the role that you're in now?
Yeah, I started my career, actually, I started my kind of college life in Indiana. I went to Purdue University. I studied engineering. I grew up in Chicago. And so, I was a Midwest kid. And I worked as an intern in steel mills in and around kind of the Indiana Harbor area where, Indiana being one of the largest steel producing states in the United States. And, that was pretty typical for a metallurgist, metallurgical engineer from Purdue University in the state of Indiana. But in March of 1998, I saw a job posting. Back then, it was a piece of paper on a tack board in the college recruiting office, and it was for a job in Houston, Texas, and it was a metallurgical engineer for a pipeline company. It was Duke Energy at the time, and in March, I flew down to Houston. I'd never been to Texas before. There was a snowstorm in Chicago and Indiana when I left. And when I got down to Houston, Texas, it was 72 degrees with no humidity. And I thought, my gosh, this is like San Diego. It must be like this all year round. And so I think it might have been at the time less about understanding and seeking out the energy industry as it was escaping a blizzard in Chicago to find my way down to what I thought was going to be low humidity, mid 70s, all year round weather. But it was very interesting, to get exposed to an industry that I hadn't seen before, to bring talent, to an industry from the Midwest, which had been the center of a lot of our, our steel and materials and material science, engineering background. But to discover an entire industry that was in large part, you think about what we build big energy infrastructure, and a lot of it is made from advanced materials and steel in particular. And so that's how I found my way to what was Duke Energy at the time. And I literally begged for the job because of what I thought was going to be better weather. And then when I got to Houston in July, I realized that it wasn't always 70 and low humidity in Houston, Texas. But I loved it anyhow.
Great. That's fantastic to hear. And, we're seeing that same thing right now. And in terms of the influx of talent in the energy industry and bringing in all sorts of talent, technology-driven, policy-driven, financially driven, all sorts of talent coming together to solve some of the toughest problems. And that's one of the things that Energy Terminal and Energy Dialogues collaborate most closely on. You're taking the helm of a incredible company at a very, very interesting time. Energy is changing faster than we could ever imagine. Electrification and AI data centers and energy policy shakeups. We have all of these complex challenges, but all of these interesting opportunities all converging at the same time. So would love to hear a little bit more about what this means for you to take this role at such a pivotal what this means for you to take this role at such a pivotal time, both in the industry as well as in the company's history.
Yeah, it is an incredible time for our company, for our industry. And you mentioned solving problems. And it's one of the things I love about our industry. We're truly working on solving not just real significant problems, frankly, some of the greatest problems of our generation. And some of the greatest challenges and opportunities of our generation. The world has an incredible need for energy. It's a growing need. It's a changing need for energy. But we know that the only way to achieve a high quality of life, the only way to lift people out of poverty, the only way to discover the next generation of technology is by having available, reliable, affordable, and increasingly important clean energy to power our future. And so that's what we're focused on as a company at Williams. And what I love about Williams in particular, we've been in business for over 115 years. This company has been building some of the most important critical energy infrastructure for over a century. And we've been evolving many times through the history of the company. Energy systems have changed a lot over the last 115 years. We aren't doing today what we were doing in 1925. And our goal is to make sure we're charting a path to 2125. And the things that we're going to be needing to do as a world, frankly, are going to in large part be defined by companies like ours, by talent and people like those that work at Williams. And so what I love about the opportunity to step into this role is really to take the organization with me. I get to get up every morning feeling like the work that we're doing has incredible meaning and opportunity and purpose. And my goal is to share that with everyone that works at Williams, everyone that we come in contact with, that we can create in this industry. It hasn't always been, I think, appreciated, understood, maybe not even given, that our industry was not only going to be important today, but is going to lead, not just be part of, lead how we get to the energy systems of the future and how we continue to improve the quality of life that we have here at home and for those, around the world that so desperately need, frankly, what we have oftentimes take for granted. And so that's what really gets me excited about this moment in time. We've had a great history as a company. I've been blessed to work with, Alan Armstrong is our CEO, who's transitioned to executive chair. We've had a great relationship together, and I get to carry on a tradition of, I think, really strong culture, really important focus on doing things the right way, finding purpose in the work that we do, but always looking forward and solving long-term problems.
And where specifically do you see the most exciting opportunities for Williams? I know data center infrastructure is a really, really big hotspot right now, renewables, electrification, and it seems like these are all markets that Williams has a potential to play a large role in. What most excites you about the direction of the company?
Today for us, there's really two aspects of energy that are really exciting. One is just the global energy story. There are still billions of people around the world that live in some form of energy poverty. And we know that the way to improve the quality of life, the way to improve outcomes is to create the availability of reliable, affordable, clean energy. I say this all the time. We take for granted the energy that we have here in the United States, but there are literally billions of people that have to heat their homes, cook their food with manure, coal, or wood. We have kids that can only read because they don't have access to electricity after night. That's not just like one-offs. That's literally millions of children around the world that can only read a book during daylight hours. Imagine the difference in outcome of someone's life just by being able to read a book at night and expanding the time during which you can learn and experience, different important parts of the world around us. That's a story that still is going to unfold for generations to come, and we need to rise to meet the needs of those everywhere around the world. So here in the United States, for us as a company, that means producing affordable, reliable, clean, American-made energy and making sure we can make that available to our friends and allies around the world. That's a huge opportunity. It's frankly critical if we're going to both lift people out of poverty, but also decarbonize the energy ecosystem around the world. We've done good things in the U.S., but the world will burn more coal this year than in any year in the history of the planet. And I said that last year, I said that the year before. We keep adding, people will turn to the most available, lowest cost energy resource if you don't provide them with something better. And so we've got to, in the United States, engineer the energy solutions of the future. Not those that just work for wealthy nations, but that'll work for everyone around the world. We're going to work on that. We're working on that. We're a part of that at Williams, but that's a huge opportunity. Then alongside that, you mentioned the technology evolution. Like, technology only happens because we've had energy to fuel the things that we've achieved, as a nation, as a world, and nothing has put a spotlight on that as much recently as artificial intelligence, which is really the conversion of energy into intelligence. And the systems that we're building that are going to create this next generation of technology are incredibly energy intensive, and only made possible by having reliable, affordable, always on dispatchable energy. And so, we're very focused on natural gas as the here and now solution that will both be necessary to support the growth in renewables, but also will be the most scalable, dispatchable energy solution that is also a proven decarbonization solution. It's been our greatest contributor to lowering emissions here in the United States over the last 10 years, and there's still a lot more that we can do, with natural gas. So the ability to both continue to meet the world's need for energy and the ability to fuel this next generation of technology, like, what better place to be, than in the middle of that opportunity set? It's a pretty exciting time.
Absolutely. And the mantra that we continue to hear, especially from the data center folks who we work with very closely, is speed, 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 speed at all costs. However, as you mentioned, we have these competing priorities: availability and affordability and decarbonization. And we're often caught in this tricky balancing act of how we prioritize them. Would love to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on how we do that tactically. How do we reliably and quickly increase our energy supply without sacrificing affordability, without sacrificing resiliency and reliability?
Yeah. First thing we have to do is recognize what you just described. The fact of the matter is that over the last 25 years, the United States has kind of been sitting on the couch, eating donuts and potato chips. We've been really comfortable, and we've achieved a lot over the last 25 years, but we have entirely outsourced the manufacturing and economic engine growth to Asia. If you look at China in 2020 versus the United States, we were the world's manufacturing leader in 2020. Today, China is by far the largest manufacturer in the world. We haven't grown electricity production over the last 25 years virtually at all. China has increased their electricity production by 10 times over that same period. So while we've been sitting on the couch, they've been in the gym, working out, training, and they're much better equipped to meet this next generation of technology evolution, where you're going to need energy to fuel the next generation of technology. And so first, we have to recognize this is a real race. And frankly, we are ill-equipped today to step up to the challenge. We've got to get back to being a country that builds, manufactures, and grows things here in the United States. And so we first have to recognize the urgency of that issue. This is a race we do not want to lose. Frankly, we cannot afford to lose. And so how do we do that, but do that in the most responsible way possible? That's why our strategy today has landed on natural gas. We've seen that as the most scalable solution that can provide affordability, 4 times cheaper than electricity at the end use level, natural gas. Reliability, it is the dispatchable solution that allows us to flex the intermittency of renewables throughout the day. Increasingly, we've taken coal and other dispatchable resources out. As we have fluctuations in energy needs in the US, natural gas is picking up the slack. And then, I mentioned the clean aspect. It's been the single largest contributor to reducing emissions over the last 10 years in the United States. So we leverage that for the here and now, while we also explore and advance the next generation of technologies that are going to fuel our energy systems, for generations to come. That's the right way, I think, to meet the need for speed today, do it in a responsible way, and also allow us to invest in those next generation technologies that frankly are going to cost more and aren't ready at scale, and need the time to get to the ability to deploy at a more efficient level.
Let's zoom in on that a little bit more. I mean, the headlines that we see are always on demand, demand, demand. So much less on the supply side of the equation. But these are real projects, big infrastructure projects, the likes of which Williams has been deploying for decades. And it's real physical stuff that has to get in the ground. It's not easy. And outside of the technology and the actual operations piece, there's a lot of other levers in the policy side, and the finance side, and the other technologies that we can leverage to be able to deploy a lot faster. What are some of the other things that you're looking toward that could help us achieve those goals?
Yeah, I mean, first, to deploy faster, we've got to just fix the system in which we try to develop projects here in the United States. One of the great stories of the history of our company, in the mid 1940s, when we were there was a global war happening. German U-boats. This is not well known. German U-boats were sinking oil tankers in the Gulf of Mexico that we were trying to move from the Gulf up into the Northeast so that we could move oil from the production areas in the Gulf of Mexico up to New York into the Northeast, where we were fueling our war efforts to support our allies in Europe. German submarines were literally sinking our oil tankers here in the United States. And the government called on the Williams brothers, Williams at the time, to build two pipelines from Houston all the way to New York. And those were called the War Emergency Pipelines. And we built those two pipelines in under a year from across the entire country so that we could fuel our war effort and support our allies and make sure that we were successful in World War II. Like, that's what our country is capable of doing. We spent 10 years trying to build the Constitution pipeline, a pipeline that is less than 200 miles long from one of the lowest cost producing areas in Pennsylvania to one of the highest energy cost areas in the United States in New England. We spent over 10 years trying to develop that project and never got it built. Like, that's what's happened here in the United States. It's become incredibly difficult to build infrastructure. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to get back to building infrastructure. I mean, this is the country that built the Hoover Dam. We built the interstate highway system. We are a nation of builders. We've got to get back to building. We've got to be able to move things at speed, at pace, not cut corners, but we've got to be able to get rid of the bureaucracy and build things much more efficiently. So permitting reform is incredibly important. And then just as a nation, recognizing the need to get back to building, I think, is critically important. And then you talk about the next generation of technologies that are also going to be, I think, important to advance our speed. We are very focused on, I don't think it's been well appreciated that you can't have intermittent renewables without having dispatchable energy solutions. So how do we balance the need to expand electrification, to expand wind and solar, but alongside it, to bring technologies like natural gas generation, carbon capture and storage, put that whole equation together? Unfortunately, it's not as simple as one or the other. Nothing is an either or in anything we're trying to solve here. I wish it were that easy, but this is a complex energy ecosystem, and we've got to be able to bring all of these solutions together and make sure that we can orchestrate the most efficient energy systems possible. The alternative is you do what China's done, which is just ramp up your coal and oil energy generation, and that's what they're doing. You hear a lot about renewables in places like China. That is not what they're using to rapidly expand their energy production. They're building a lot more coal and oil-based generation, and I think we can do it smarter, but we've got to make sure we're not losing efficiency and speed.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions that we see in the industry about where our power is coming from, and that's one of the reasons that we as Energy Terminal exists. And one of the founding principles of Energy Dialogues is educating people, especially educating young people, about what they need to know about where their energy is coming from and how everything around them comes together. Would love for you to highlight maybe one of your favorite stories or favorite misconceptions that you've seen people have in the industry that you just love talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the first one I've already mentioned, that I ask my kids, they get it right now, but what is the single largest contributor to reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And by the way, the U.S. led the world from 2015 through 2025 in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And if you ask yourself what would be the single greatest contributor to doing that, most would have probably said, it's got to be solar or wind or Tesla or some new technology. Well, in fact, it was primarily driven by the displacement of coal with natural gas for power generation. And so we know that natural gas can be a decarbonization solution. It's a proven fact. It is not a theory. And so I think helping people understand that, and by the way, that we still have coal plants operating along our footprint. If we converted just on our footprint, the coal plants that are operating today to natural gas, again, a technology we know and can do with no risk, with private money. If we did that, we would have the emissions reductions impact of removing 80 million cars off the road each and every day, forever. It would be like electrifying 80 million cars like that and not powering them with, the grid that is a combination of different fuel sources, zero emissions, removed from the grid. So you could have the equivalent of removing 80 million cars a day from an emissions perspective, just by continuing here in the United States, removing coal-fired generation, replacing it with natural gas. And then when you start to think about China this year will burn 17 times the amount of coal that we will burn here in the United States. We've got to go after that. That is emissions know no borders. If we really want to make an impact, we can do great things here in the United States, but we have got to address the global coal issue, and we've got to take that generation and convert it to natural gas as quickly as possible while we work on the next generation of at-scale solutions. And then, you think about India. India is now the most populous country on the planet. It's been centuries, since China wasn't the most populous country on the planet. India surpassed China about 2 years ago, and India is just getting started. A person in India uses 1/15 the amount of energy that a person in the United States uses. That's not because they're more efficient. It's because they don't yet have access to the quality of life that we enjoy here in the US. They want it. Frankly, they deserve it. They're going to turn to the most available, cheapest resource they can find. They're already doing it. If you look at India, it looks like China 25 years ago. They're starting to ramp their coal and oil energy production and generation. We've got to provide them with a better solution. And so that's what I think people need to understand about when we talk about solving problems here. You're going to hear about a lot of cool ideas. We actually have at scale opportunities to have the biggest impact in both solving the need for energy around the world, but also helping to solve the climate and emissions challenges that we have.
And not only beyond our borders, but also domestically, it really feels like we are at the cusp of a new industrial revolution, especially in the energy space, or led by the energy space. And I could not think of a more exciting time for people to come into this industry and to truly make an impact, boots on the ground, and move the needle on what's most important to them and what's most important in driving progress for our world. Would love to hear any advice that you have for young professionals thinking about starting out. Where can they go and make the biggest impact? Where can they move the needle?
Look, I think you said it well. Energy is important in everything we do. And in the United States, being a low-cost, efficient energy producer is a competitive advantage. And frankly, it's what leads to all the other cool things that we want to achieve as a country and globally. And so, my message to young talent, to students, to those entering the workforce is, I am blessed, to be able to find real purpose in the work that we do. And I think that when you look at a company like Williams, I think take a lot of pride in the fact that we've been around solving problems for over a century. If you want to be a part of something where you can really make an impact, if you want to think about, we're told the myth oftentimes of the work-life balance as if there's some trade-off between the two. You're going to spend a lot of your life working. So the best thing that you can do is seek something that you find, meaning and purpose in, so that the work that you do is an important part of your life, and you find real meaning and purpose in it. And so that's what we're trying to create at a company like Williams, a company that's got a rich history, but is also looking towards the next generation and beyond of opportunity, be a part of something that, none of us could do on our own. Like, we're going to go solve problems that no one person can solve on their own. It's going to take us pulling together as a team, and you're going to be a part of creating something that will last long after, each of us are here. We're going to make our mark in a way that's meaningful and impactful. And, that's what I encourage people to do. Because when you wake up and you find like real meaning and purpose, it's a heck of a lot more fun to get out of bed, to get up and get fired up, go to work, enjoy the people that you're working with, work on something that's meaningful and important. Like, that's a really, I think, good recipe for a work life well lived, but also just a life well lived. And so that'd be my advice: is find something that you're passionate about, find something you can really connect to, and go after it.
Someone working in a quickly growing startup, I could not agree more. And it's really great to see Williams truly investing in the next generation of energy leaders, and coming back again this year as the sponsor of the student program for the North American Gas Forum. Please tell us a little bit about how you hope to be involved with the students in the program and with NAGF more broadly.
Yeah, so the NAGF program is awesome, and this is the pipeline of the future. I mean, these are this talent that is rising to the occasion and to the challenge is what's going to make sure that we do kind of solve our generation's greatest challenges and opportunities. And as we've discussed, I mean, energy affordability, energy reliability, energy decarbonization, like, these are some of the biggest challenges, but also opportunities of our generation and of this next generation of talent that's going to rise to meet it. And so, for us at Williams, we love spending time with that emerging talent. We focus on supporting that talent both while at school, but also we're constantly pulling new talent into the organization. We've got a very robust internship program. We bring talent into what we call our rotational program, where we try to move a lot of the talent around the organization. And so that's what we as an organization are very focused on, is making sure that this next generation understands the opportunity. When you turn on the news, if you turn on the TV, you don't, or I guess nowadays it's TikTok or whatever, wherever you're getting your kind of information. I don't think our story is well told. I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, it's a lot of sound bites, or it's a lot of very kind of segregated bits and pieces of information. But the story of energy is complex, but hopefully we can tell it in a way where we're connecting with these students and we're helping them understand that you can be a part of this industry and you can work on the things that really matter, to make the world a better place. And so that's why we enjoy and really appreciate the effort, with Energy Dialogues and the NAGF program for the students. And, we'll continue to have our support.
Telling that story is why we're here, and it really starts with conversations like this. So, Chad, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It was fantastic to have you to share this incredible message with the next generation of energy leaders.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Appreciate you.